3, 2, 1, end of test. Keying with a go.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell, and I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Now, today, we're going down attack helicopters, but let's say that we are taking a step back to the Cro-Magnon, which is maybe a good word, genesis of how some of these tactics actually started. A lot of these things, like, many things involved in warfare started in World War II, and there was a genesis out of that. And today we are going to talk about the tank fist, the Panzerfaust, which you hear me talk a lot about TOW, which are wire-guided anti-tank missiles, and Hellfire tank missiles. They all kind of go back to these early anti-tank weapons, and the one that was most lethal was not the bazooka, it was not the Panzerschreck, it was the Panzerfaust, which in German is tank fist. Thank you. Pretty straightforward. Now, my Panuma assistant, I am going to, if this would be good if there were 2 beers in here right now. There is not, but this is actually one of the first practical helmets I've got in some time. We're going to throw that off there. That came away. Now, we're going to be talking about the Bucher, the BU-181. I'm sure I butchered that. The 181, the Bestman. Now, the Bestman, the term Bestman was for it's a maritime term, actually, and it's for, like, on fishing boats, like a person that worked on a fishing boat or worked on a boat. So that's where Bestman came from. But the one that we are looking for, and by the way, this is not a 1A1, it is a 109, but it's going to fill my hands. The Bestman is known, in the context that we're going to talk about it, is known as the Panzerjäger, or the tank hunter. Now, the 181 was primarily used as a liaison aircraft. It was used as a guider tow aircraft. Now, we don't have a 181, but we do have a 109. So, Greg, if you could throw up a plan view of a 181, I'm going to throw up a plan view of the 109. Obviously, very different aircraft, as I said, glider tow or liaison aircraft. The top speed, though, is important here, 134 miles an hour. Now, why is that important, Kevin? It's important because attack helicopters we talked about operate in that 170, 180 range. So we're talking about an aircraft down low, light, and it moved at relatively the same speed. Maybe, the Augusto that we talked about, 50 miles an hour faster. Yes, it's a chain gun, but remember, its primary function is to, if you're going in an air mobile, is to support infantry and make the enemy put their head down. This Panzerjäger absolutely did that, and the only reason they didn't use the Germans didn't use a helicopter for it was because they didn't have one that was practical that could carry 4 Panzerfausts. In March of 1945, the Germans reached out. The 181 had been used for all these other relatively non-violent purposes, and they said, gather them all together, and we're going to turn them into these Panzerjägers. And the idea behind that was they would take 4 of these Panzerfausts, these tank fist missiles, or 6 in some cases, and put them along the wings, 2 or 3 on either side. And I've seen both of those. You can argue with me in the comments. I've seen 4, I've seen 6, so who knows, it's kind of lost to history. Now, they were used to moderate success. And I'm going to talk about the Panzerfaust in depth because you have to understand how the platform, but what was most devastating on that particular aircraft was the weapon. And so now in this, it's interesting, this 109 has a bomb on it, and this would be a unusual view, or an unusual use for a 109. Obviously, it was in a fighter, but again, if it's later in the war, the Germans are pressing everything into combat. These 181s, which were fairly lightly, they were no armor. The wings were made out of wood, so they were lightly constructed, and they were pressing even these 109s carrying bombs. The 262, Hitler wanted as a vengeance weapon to carry bombs. It wasn't until he pretty much released it against these B-17s and these big bomber formations that it had any real success. It was never designed to be a bomber. But we had a lot of stuff that was being pressed into service as the Allies were basically overrunning Germany from both sides. Now, this Panzerfaust, this tank fist, there were 8,200 variants of these weapons made. Now, as I said, it's not a bazooka. It has a shaped charge on the front of it. And Greg, I'm going to put you to work here and get me a shaped charge. But the idea is it had like a cone on the front of it, and the charge behind the cone was kind of V-shaped. It had two horns on the end. And what happened was when the weapon detonated, and I'm not an ordnance person, so and we're not going to start the ordnance channel, but the idea was when this shaped charge detonated, there's an explosive behind it. Typically, the lining of this charge was made out of like nickel or copper, a lot of copper. And what would happen as the charge detonated, it would create a stream of metal that would hit the armor of the other of the tank, and it would literally burn its way through the tank armor. What that caused is, and Greg can, I'm sure, show some Panzerfaust hits on Allied tanks or how they're being used, so you can throw that in. But the idea was this liquid metal would hit the armor, and it would literally burn through. Now, why was it so devastating? It was so devastating because of the spalling. Now, what is spalling? Spalling is the fragmentation or the burning away that sprayed away from the hit. And what would happen with the Panzerfaust, the spalling was devastating. It would go everywhere. And if you're in a tank and you have liquid metal going everywhere, that is a bad day for you. And it was devastating against tanks. I'm going to talk about how seriously the Soviets and the Americans took this, but the idea behind it was if you had an aircraft coming in with these and they're spraying armor with this from above, so you're getting the weak part of the armor as well, the tanks and the armored formations that were coming in, the weakest armor was on the top and in the back, the frontal armor, where they expected to take a hit. In some case, and the turrets and the side armor was fairly thick and could defend against us. But you get this spraying hot metal into the interior of the tank, and it was over. The tank would not survive. Now, this is different than we've talked about A-10s and kinetic energy weapons, which basically fire like a depleted uranium shell, like the A-10. The idea behind that is it hits so hard that the hit on the armor basically breaks up the metal, and that sprays into the interior of the tank. The M1 Abrams, you can use those. They fire these darts, which are very effective. So the Abrams will fire a dart, which is an anti-tank round, and Greg can throw one of those up, or they'll fire a high explosive shell, which is not nearly as effective against armor. But these, a lot of these tank weapons, anti-tank weapons, still use a shaped charge to this day. I mean, even some of the weapons that are being used in Ukraine, and in those enclosed spaces, it was it was devastating. Now, this weapon came from a team of inventors led by Dr. Heinrich Langweiter. I'm sure I butchered his name, Weiter. But let me give you an idea. 3% of tank losses at D-Day were from Panzerfaust. By the time that they got to the German frontier, and some of this also can be that the Germans were arming, they basically had these Jaeger teams going around, tank hunter teams going around, but the 70% of the tank losses were from the Panzerfaust. That's how effective it was by the time the Allied armies got to the German frontier. So it was and the armored columns and the tanks were terrified of these weapons. You see in that movie Fury, you can see they got logs and sandbags, and everything the idea was to slow that charge down or deflect that charge so that if it hit you, this Panzerfaust charge, it would be deflected off of. Now, it's not to be confused with a bazooka. A bazooka fired a different type of round. There were some shape rounds in there, but a bazooka was more of a rocket round. A Panzerfaust is a completely different animal. The good old Dr. Heinrich, when he invented this, he came up with the tank fist, the Panzerfaust. He named the prototype a good German name. You know what it was named? The Gretchen. That was the name of the prototype round for the Panzerfaust. Fitting, isn't it? It's a great German name, the Gretchen. So he would develop variants of this weapon, and as I said, they would put it on these airborne platforms. The weapon was effective, depending on the variant, from about 100 feet to about 490 feet. It was one of those German kind of Wunderweapons that people emulated or took away stuff after the war and emulated it. But like everything else in the arms race, you come up with different armor that can deal with a shaped charge, and there were different ways to defeat shaped charges. And then after the Panzerfaust went away, you had the RPG, and the RPG-7, which I think is the most lethal now. Although again, this isn't the armament channel, but that RPG-7 with a heat round, I think, is one of the most dangerous weapons. Now, my salute today is something that is important, and that is to the tankers that had to face this airborne killer in these Panzerfausts. If you're at home, think about getting in your car and blacking out all the windows and having little portals, and that's all you can see out of. And you've got people running around outside of you that are hell-bent on killing you, and they have weapons that will essentially incinerate you in your car, and you're not going to get out. Remember, if you have liquid metal inside your tank, it won't stop for anything. So the tank crews, both the Soviet tank crews, it's not really cliche to help the Russians these days because of Ukraine, but Soviet tank crews, American tank crews, British tank crews, the Germans even exported this weapon to the Japanese, which didn't make good use of it. Japanese never came up for a solution to American armor, but if you were a tank crew in the Eastern or the Western Front and you were facing the 181 armed with the tank fist with 4 Gretchens hanging off of it, bent on incinerating you, I salute you. And by the way, Vina soda with smarts. It's ginger fizz, stevia free. Was it that? This is like I've seen another one like that, stevia free. Had a little bit of fizz. Brilliant from the brain to the belly. These guys are good. Now the biggest concern I have with this one is this can it looks like it's been thrown against the wall. So to those tank crews, I salute you. Oh my goodness. That is a vile. Well, if you could hear my assistant say foul off camera, but that is truly vile. We'll take one more sip for those valiant tank crews. Oh, man, that's bad. Throw that out. Burn it. Do whatever you got to do. So you would see these tank fists, these Panzerfaust, all over the battlefield. Shaped charges were even used up into composite weapons that the Germans were delivering at that time. These Mistels, which were basically a fighter on a bomber body, and they would use them against bridges. And this was late in the war. They were trying to keep the Russians from getting into Berlin. So composite shape charges and these composite aircraft were pressing in any of these types of aircraft into service beyond what they were originally intended. The Germans did a whole bunch of it as they became more and more desperate to stop the Allies from penetrating Germany. Now, the other thing that is very cool was the 181 was used in a movie. Did you know that, Kevin? It was actually used in The Great Escape, and Donald Pleasence and James Garner got out during The Great Escape, and then flew the 181 that they stole from a German airfield to the point where they crashed it. And I believe Donald Pleasence didn't make it out. What a great actor, but he was in The Great Escape. The aircraft was in The Great Escape. That is the epitaph of the 181, but it goes to those. This was when we're talking about people looking at battlefield technology and coming up with new weapons. There's no question that this type of technology had a big influence on airborne anti-tank weapons and how efficient they were with these rudimentary designs, and now take a leap forward in 50 years, and we've taken weapons that are much smarter on helicopters that can loiter, that can look around, different sensors, they can see different elements of the spectrum so you can't hide from them. And this particular method of attacking armored vehicles and armored formations, especially as the Allies had to grapple with Soviet armor that might come through the Fulda Gap and into Western Europe, became critical, and they had to be on the platforms, and that's where these attack helicopters completely filled the bill. But it had to start somewhere, and Bazooka Joe or the 181 were the way to do it. Now, if you want to be the coolest kid on your block, you need one of these Memphis Belle drink thermoses. This is incredibly cool. You can see that. It's got the movie Memphis Belle on the side. My production assistant here, Kevin, tells me that a Panzerfaust will not penetrate this. It's not true. But if you click on the link, Jason will happily forge one of these for you, paint it on, again, not true, and get it out to you. But it is really, I feel like I'm on the home shopping channel, but it is really cool, and you definitely need one of these. So click on that link. If you came across us on YouTube and you like one-take Warbird videos, we are the right place. We only do this one time. Kevin and I sit out here, bang it out, bingo, bongo, bingo, and it goes out. It's a technical term, Kevin. You can keep it. And if you came across us on Facebook, same thing. We're not always perfect, and you can tell us that in the comments, which you do. We'd be happy to respond back to you. If you know somebody that likes Warbird videos, forward us on. We're always trying to build a channel. Give us a like or subscription. We could use that. Remember, we can't do all this, and I'm standing in front of this fantastic WASP exhibit that we have. The lady pilots from World War II are flying all those military aircraft. You need to come and see this. It's at the museum right now. Go out to our Facebook page and click on the link. You're going to want to see that. We are very grateful that this exhibit is with us. It's here for a limited time, so keep an eye on the website because it will be going away. And if you're teaching those kiddos at home, don't forget to click on that link, get those education guides. There's all kinds of great stuff in there. We provide it for free. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
3, 2, 1, end of test. Skiing was a go.
Rise to the blessed day, all my fears have gone away. I guess this means I'm here to stay. Yeah, I'm ready to fly, ready to fly. Wasn't long ago I shook at the thought of being hooked. But ever since I wrote my book, I'm ready to fly, ready to fly.
Come along and join us, we can plug you in a simulator. We'll teach you how to dance and be the perfect imitator. We'll give away all your music to the operator. We were born with a light to shine, and we can do it in our lifetime. And then we get the balance right. Oh, we're riding on the satellite.
Satellite.
We're here, Alpha.
I was walking down the park, saw them hitting the beat. The sound that emanated, it was really sweet. Told them of a shyer man bitten twice, and gave a little old school good advice. Pretend is not the thing, got to be yourself. Honesty, integrity, happy